You're listening to the Connection Care Community Podcast, a podcast designed to help you understand your body more deeply and feel more confident navigating your hormones, cycle, and fertility. Each episode offers grounded, research-informed guidance and integrative tools to support hormone health, embodied awareness, and informed choice. If you're seeking clarity, connection, and a more trusting relationship with your body, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Here's your host, the founder of Connection Care Therapy, Majida.
Hello and welcome to the Connection Care Community Podcast. My name is Majida, and today we'll be talking about living in a body that isn't believed, specifically the emotional ecology of endometriosis. So there is a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from having to translate your body over and over and over again. Not because there is a sense that the pain that a person may be experiencing or the discomfort that they're experiencing is unclear, but because it keeps being filtered through frameworks that don't quite hold or fit the experience. So what I mean by that is that it may be that what you're experiencing is too cyclical to actually be deemed acute, or too invisible to be seen as urgent, or too complex to neatly fit into short appointment windows. This is what I call the emotional ecology of endometriosis. It's when a person living with this condition isn't only experiencing what is happening in their bodies, but it's what is unfolding around them in the exam rooms, in relationships, in workplaces, in the internal conversations about what can and cannot be trusted. Right? That's the emotional ecology of endometriosis. I've shared in other places on this podcast that it can take an average of between 7 to 10 years between the onset of symptoms and a person receiving a diagnosis of endometriosis. As I've talked about before, and as those of you who may be out there navigating the condition or know someone who is, that can mean years of pain being reframed as normal, of being told that it's hormonal or stress related or something that you'll grow out of. What goes unaddressed most often in that time is that there is, more often than not, at least in my experience as a practitioner, a psychological impact of that delay. And that is the gap that I see really not being supported when it comes to conversations around endometriosis. What research has shown consistently is that there are higher rates of anxiety, depression, and a reduced quality of life amongst people with endometriosis. Not always because of just the pain itself, right? That's a component, and I do not want to minimize that component. But in addition to the pain, there is oftentimes this prolonged experience where a person is seeking validation and they are not being believed. When pain persists without explanation, the nervous system learns to adapt. And what that adaptation can sometimes look like when there is repeated minimization and dismissal is that self-trust can start to erode. And over time, clarity stops feeling as useful because clarity has not led to care. And that experience is deeply disoriented. One of the things that I really want to offer, because I'm guessing that there's like two types of people who are listening to this podcast and who have been listening to this series, is those who are navigating the experience of living life with endometriosis and who are looking for more support and more validation and answers. And more than anything, I want you all to know that I see you and that I'm here with you and that you are not alone in this experience. And if I could provide any kind of insight to support you, then I am 100% just that's what I'm here to do. The second group are going to be practitioners, right? Those of us out there who work with clients and patients who are navigating the experience of endometriosis. Now, I really want to speak to the second group right now, is please listen to the things that I'm sharing and take them into consideration when it comes to how you navigate your practice and your care of those who are navigating this condition and other conditions that may not be clear initially, but still deserve our deep consideration and investigation. Okay? I say that because the medical gaslighting component to the endometriosis experience, as well as other experiences that I've talked about in other podcasts, is when it comes to women's reproductive health care, the medical gaslighting is out of check. It's really, really, really just, it's a problem. It's a big problem, right? And so one of the things that this series is meant to do, and what my podcast is meant to do, is for us to, as practitioners also, to start really looking at how we practice and do better overall to make sure that we're properly serving our community members. So I'm thinking of now one of my mentees. I teach in a program that certifies other fertility awareness educators. I'm a faculty member, and I also serve as a mentor as well to students as they're navigating their internship year. And I had a mentee who shared with me that prior to getting her endometriosis diagnosis, that she had kept a pain journal for 3 years. This pain journal included cycle day, pain intensity, location, what helped, what didn't help. If those of you who have ever done a FAM tracking practice, a cycle tracking practice, know that those of us who get into it, like we tend to keep details, like we tend to write down our experiences and really keep notes, really robust notes about our experiences of our cycles and our bodies and what we're going through. So you can imagine what my mentee was keeping, right, for 3 years, and brought this robust information, this like treasure trove, truly, for any practitioner, should be a treasure trove of information about her body and what she was going through. And she shared with me that she brought it in to appointment after appointment after appointment. She had one doctor who glanced at it and said in a tone, "You're really focused on this." Right? The tone was enough to lead her to another doctor, who then suggested that she stop tracking altogether because the tracking itself was making her anxious, and the anxiety was probably part of the problem. And of course, that led her away from that practitioner into another doctor, who then recommended mental health therapy for health anxiety, because what this practitioner saw was health anxiety and micromanagement instead of my mentee's pain and the concerns that she was having. So eventually she found a practitioner, a doctor, who recommended that she go through and get the laparoscopy to see if she actually had something else going on. And that something else turned out to be stage 3 endometriosis. And my student shared with me, it's so intense even remembering this conversation. She shared first that she felt relief, right? And then she shared grief. And grief, we talk about the 5 stages of grief, and one of those stages is anger. And so my student experienced righteous anger, that what she said was, I was right this whole time, that my body was telling me that something was wrong, and I spent years and years being told that I was just overreacting. So the diagnosis did bring answers, and that those answers brought a sense of relief, but it also brought years and years of grief to the surface, right? Grief to the surface, grief around loss as to quality of life, and loss as to what happens when a person is not believed, their experience is not believed. So being dismissed doesn't just affect how a person interacts with healthcare. It actually reshapes how we live in our bodies. When pain becomes something that we are told to manage quietly, right? Signals can start to downplay, needs can become minimized, that the body can start to look less like a source of information and more like a liability, something the body now becomes unpredictable, inconvenient, and even unreliable. Many people learn to move through life around their body instead of with their body and in their body, being embodied. There's speaking of bodies, but different kinds of body of research, right? There's a body of research called interoception, right, on a topic called interoception. And interoception is our ability to sense and interpret internal signals. Interoception shows lets us know, right, our body, what is going on inside of our body, and then we are therefore, right, through being able to understand what is happening and interpret what's happening, sense what's happening in our bodies, communicate that externally. And what research on interoception shows is that repeated dismissal can actually impair a person's ability to utilize interoception. Right? When you're constantly told that what you feel is insignificant, you learn to mistrust your own sensations. And the body, right? The body is trying to communicate, and at the same time, it's also being taught that communication does not matter. When we as practitioners, if we as practitioners, right, dismiss our clients and the authenticity of what they are sharing with us, then we are part of literally teaching their body that communication does not matter. And we can only imagine how absolutely dangerous that is, right? How absolutely deeply unethical that is, how absolutely harmful that is. So I've worked with clients who describe feeling like a split from their bodies. They talk about their symptoms as something out there, clinical, careful, polite, just as though they're describing something else that someone else out there is going through. They'll apologize for pain. They'll soften their language. They'll try to be an easy patient. And that kind of distance is protective. It allows someone to function when their pain isn't being addressed. But it does come at a cost, because once you disconnect from your body to survive dismissal, reconnecting, even under safe care, can oftentimes then take more time. So endometriosis, as I mentioned in another podcast, I went deep into endometriosis and grief. It's the grief of altered timelines and fertility plans and careers shaped around flares, intimacy that had to be negotiated in ways that you may not feel aligns with what you actually desire. It's the grief of identity shifts. The person who once pushed through anything is now learning that pushing has consequences. Right? The athlete who maybe can't train in the same way, or the professional who has to step away from work that she absolutely loved, or the partner who feels like her body keeps changing the rules around intimacy and connection. It's the grief of the unpredictable, missed weddings or canceled trips, declined invitations, not because you don't want to go, but because your body might not be aligned, right? It might be experiencing too much discomfort to actually socialize, right? This is a kind of grief that doesn't always just arrive dramatically. It can settle really quietly into daily life. It can show up as fatigue or resentment or low-grade sadness that's hard to name. Research calls this ambiguous loss or chronic sorrow. It's a grief that can resurface because the loss is ongoing and evolving. One of my clients described this grief as, I grieve the person I was before. I grieve the future that I thought I'd have. And sometimes I grieve the day I planned before a flare showed up and changed everything. So that layered grief can, for some, be part of living with endometriosis. And naming it and seeing it, giving this grief the exquisite attention that it deserves, does not make it heavier. It just makes it less lonely. Validation, of course, does not replace treatment, but it does change how treatment is received, and that matters. When someone is believed, their nervous system can soften, their Pain can be contextualized rather than minimized or dismissed. The body is no longer having to escalate its signals to be heard, and this is why validation in and of itself can be deeply therapeutic. When people feel heard by their providers, what the research shows is that outcomes improve, that anxiety decreases, that engagement with care also increases. On a neurological level, feeling believed reduces threat activation and restores access to cognitive and emotional resources that may not have been available when someone is braced, right? Is bracing. I've seen clients whose pain didn't fully disappear, but, and this is an important but the suffering around their experience of pain or discomfort drastically changed when someone finally said, I believe you. What you're experiencing makes sense. So this constant internal questioning, am I exaggerating or am I imagining this? That gets to quiet, and that shift, truly, it does matter. So living well with endometriosis doesn't require a person constantly optimizing or forcing positivity. Oftentimes, it can begin with reclaiming what I'll refer to as like reclaiming authorship over your experience. Agency might look like learning your cycle well enough to anticipate a flare, or choosing to work with practitioners who listen or support you in medical advocacy and agency. It may mean setting boundaries around what your body can give in any given season. So for some, integrative support around hormones or gut health, inflammation, fertility, that's part of the picture. But for others, it can simply be learning to plan life in a way that is more aligned and less filled with self-blame. Meaning doesn't have to come from erasing limitation. It can come from relationship, and the relationship with the body I've seen it can be rebuilt even after years of being unheard. So I'm going to, close out this podcast here. I think that those are the things that I really wanted to share about the emotional ecology of endometriosis. Endometriosis can, for many, it does leave a mark that doesn't always show up on imaging. As I've shared, and if you know anyone who's living with endometriosis, or if you yourself have or are living with endometriosis, you may resonate with what I shared about the altered timelines or unanswered questions, or a body that has learned to endure quietly. So what I offer is that honoring that truth doesn't reduce the complexity of the condition, that when we honor the fullness of the experience, then we allow those who are navigating it to step fully into their agency, authenticity, and empowerment. So thank you for listening, and thank you for just being here and taking a moment to honor your body's intelligence, the intelligence of your experience. If you'd like to continue exploring these topics, I have a full article on this on my Substack. I also have tons of endometriosis resources on my website. You can just go to connectioncaretherapy.com, and if you type in the search endometriosis, you'll see a whole range of everything from supplements to articles to all kinds of things that pop up that may be supportive. I would love to hear from you. Please do head on over to my Substack and subscribe, or if you're listening to this on YouTube or one of the other podcast formats, I would really, really appreciate a subscribe. It helps me to know that the work that I'm doing matters and that there are people out there who are listening and benefiting. And so, thank you again so much for your time. It's been wonderful again to spend a few moments with you, and I look forward to chatting with you next time. And in the meantime, be sure to stay connected.
That does it for this episode of the Connection Care Community Podcast with Majida. Thank you so much for listening. We hope you're leaving with a fresh perspective on your body and overall well-being, along with practical tools you can integrate into daily life. The support doesn't stop here. Be sure to connect with us online at connectioncaretherapy.com for more resources to guide you on your journey. You can also find us on Substack and connect with Majida on Instagram at Majida Sai'da. Remember to rate, review, and share this podcast. And most importantly, stay connected.